The morning sun cast a golden glow across London as thousands of people lined the streets, their faces filled with excitement and anticipation. Today was no ordinary day. After decades of waiting, the moment had finally arrived when Prince William would be crowned King of England and Catherine would become Queen beside him. The air buzzed with energy as royal fans from around the world had traveled to witness this historic moment. Catherine stood before the mirror in her private chambers at Buckingham Palace, her hands trembling slightly as her team of stylists made final adjustments to her coronation gown. The dress was a masterpiece of British craftsmanship, designed by Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen. Every detail had been carefully planned months in advance. The ivory silk crepe gown featured intricate embroidery that told the story of the United Kingdom's four nations, with roses for England, thistles for Scotland, daffodils for Wales, and shamrocks for Northern Ireland woven into delicate patterns across the fabric. Her jewelry selection had been a topic of intense discussion among royal experts for weeks. Catherine had chosen to wear the George IV state diadem, the same sparkling headpiece that Queen Elizabeth II had worn to her own coronation 70 years earlier. The diadem contained over 1,000 diamonds and precious stones, each one catching the light as she moved. Around her neck hung a stunning diamond necklace that had belonged to Queen Mary, connecting her to generations of royal women who had worn these treasures before her. Meanwhile, in his own preparation room, William paced nervously as his valet helped him into the traditional coronation robes. The crimson velvet robe of state stretched behind him, its golden embroidery representing centuries of royal tradition. He had spent months learning the ancient ceremonial procedures, practicing his movements and memorizing the sacred words he would speak during the ceremony. Despite his years of preparation for this role, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever on this morning. His thoughts drifted to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had passed away 2 years earlier. She had spent her final years preparing him for this moment, sharing wisdom gained from 7 decades on the throne. William could almost hear her gentle voice reminding him that duty came before personal feelings, and that the crown belonged not to him, but to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. The palace corridors buzzed with activity as staff members hurried to complete final preparations. Florists arranged thousands of flowers throughout Westminster Abbey, creating displays that would serve as a backdrop for the most important ceremony in British royal history. Security teams conducted last-minute checks, ensuring that every possible detail had been considered for the safety of the royal family and the thousands of guests who would attend. Outside the palace gates, the crowds continued to grow. Families had been camping on the streets for days, determined to secure the best viewing spots along the processional route. Children waved small British flags while their parents held up phones to capture every moment. Street vendors sold commemorative items, from mugs featuring William and Catherine's portraits to miniature crowns for young royal fans to wear. The international media presence was overwhelming. News crews from every major network had set up elaborate broadcasting stations along the route. Reporters spoke excitedly into cameras, describing the scene to millions of viewers around the world who were watching from their homes. Royal commentators analyzed every detail they could observe, from the weather conditions to the outfits worn by arriving guests. Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, arrived at the palace early that morning to spend a few quiet moments with her daughter before the ceremony began. The two women embraced, both fighting back tears of joy and pride. Carol had watched her daughter transform from a university student who caught the eye of a prince into a confident royal who had won the hearts of the British people. William's father, now King Charles III, had abdicated the throne 6 months earlier to allow his son to take the crown while still young and energetic. Charles visited William's chambers to offer final words of encouragement and blessing. Father and son stood together in silence for a moment, both understanding the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The final preparations were nearly complete. Catherine's hair had been styled in an elegant updo that would support the weight of the crown she would receive later in the day. Her makeup was subtle yet radiant, designed to look flawless under the bright lights of the Abbey and the television cameras that would broadcast every moment to the world. As the appointed hour approached, both William and Catherine took a few minutes alone to center themselves. They had been married for over a decade, had raised 3 children together, and had served the British people faithfully in their roles as Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Yet today would mark the beginning of an entirely new chapter in their lives. The sound of church bells began to ring across London, signaling that the procession would soon begin. Palace staff made final checks of the Golden State coach, the ornate carriage that would carry the couple to Westminster Abbey. The horses that would pull the coach had been specially trained for months to handle the crowds and noise they would encounter along the route. Catherine fastened her earrings, took one last look in the mirror, and whispered a small prayer for strength and guidance. In just a few hours she would be Queen Catherine, but for now she was still simply Kate, the commoner who had fallen in love with a prince and was about to fulfill a destiny she could never have imagined as a young woman. The moment had arrived. Palace doors opened, and the most anticipated royal procession in generations was about to begin. History was waiting to be made, and the eyes of the world were watching as William and Catherine prepared to step into their roles as King and Queen of the United Kingdom. The Golden State coach rolled slowly through the palace gates as crowds erupted in thunderous cheers. William and Catherine sat inside the ornate carriage, their faces glowing with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. The coach, built in 1762, had carried British monarchs to their coronations for over 2 centuries. Its golden exterior gleamed in the sunlight while the intricate carvings and paintings on its panels told stories of Britain's royal heritage. Catherine's hand found William's as they waved to the massive crowds lining the streets. The procession moved at a ceremonial pace, allowing thousands of well-wishers to catch glimpses of their future king and queen. The couple had practiced this journey many times, but nothing could have prepared them for the overwhelming emotion of the actual moment. Every face in the crowd seemed to shine with happiness and pride. The household cavalry rode alongside the coach, their polished breastplates reflecting the morning sun. The soldiers sat perfectly straight on their magnificent black horses, their plumed helmets adding grandeur to the already spectacular scene. Behind the royal couple's coach followed a procession of carriages carrying other members of the royal family, including William's father Charles, his stepmother Camilla, and various cousins, aunts, and uncles. Along the Mall, the famous red-carpeted avenue leading to Buckingham Palace, spectators had been waiting since before dawn. Many had traveled from across the United Kingdom and beyond to witness this historic moment. An elderly woman from Scotland held up a sign reading, "God Save the King," tears streaming down her cheeks as the coach passed. Nearby, a group of children from a local school waved handmade British flags and sang the national anthem at the top of their lungs. The international guests riding in the procession represented the global significance of this coronation. Prime ministers, presidents, and royal family members from around the world had come to London to witness William's accession to the throne. The guest list read like a who's who of world leaders, each adding to the diplomatic importance of the ceremony. Catherine caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Her former university friends had gathered at a prime viewing spot, holding a banner that read, "From Freshers' Week to Queen." The sight made her smile, remembering those carefree days at St. Andrews University where she and William had first met in their student accommodation. Who could have predicted that the shy girl studying art history would one day become Queen of England? The coach turned onto Whitehall, passing government buildings where civil servants had paused their work to watch from windows. The Horse Guards parade ground was filled with military personnel in full-dress uniform, their medals and decorations catching the light as they saluted the passing procession. The precision and pageantry of the British military was on full display, showcasing centuries of tradition and honor. Street performers and musicians had positioned themselves along the route, adding to the festive atmosphere. A brass band played patriotic tunes while children danced to the music. Food vendors did booming business selling fish and chips, tea, and commemorative treats decorated with royal insignia. The entire city had transformed into a celebration of British culture and heritage. William looked out at the sea of British flags and felt the weight of his ancestors' legacy. He thought about his grandmother Elizabeth, who had made this same journey as a young woman in 1953. The black and white photographs of her coronation had seemed like ancient history when he was growing up, but now he understood the profound responsibility that came with wearing the crown. Every wave to the crowd was a promise to serve his people faithfully. The procession passed Parliament Square, where Big Ben chimed the hour in perfect synchronization with the ceremony schedule. The ancient clock tower had witnessed countless royal processions over the years, and its familiar chimes added a sense of continuity to the historic moment. Tourists and locals alike craned their necks to catch glimpses of the royal couple through the coach windows. Catherine's jewelry sparkled brilliantly in the sunlight as she waved to the crowds. Royal watchers in the audience pointed excitedly at her diamond tiara, recognizing it as the same piece worn by Queen Elizabeth during her own coronation. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. This was a passing of the torch from one generation to the next, a continuation of the monarchy's enduring presence in British life. Young people held up smartphones and tablets, streaming live footage to social media platforms around the world. The coronation was trending globally on every major social network, with millions of people sharing photos and videos of the procession. Hashtags like #Coronation Day and King William dominated online conversations as people from every continent joined in the celebration. The coach slowed as it approached Westminster Abbey, the Gothic cathedral where British monarchs had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The building's twin towers loomed majestically against the blue sky, while its ancient stones seemed to whisper stories of all the kings and queens who had entered these same doors throughout history. Banners and flowers decorated the abbey's exterior, creating a festive welcome for the arriving royal party. Security was tight but discreet around the abbey. Plainclothes officers mingled with the crowds while uniformed police maintained order at key checkpoints. The Metropolitan Police had spent months planning for this event, coordinating with intelligence services to ensure the safety of the royal family and the thousands of guests who would attend the ceremony. As the Golden State coach came to a stop outside Westminster Abbey, a hush fell over the crowd. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. William and Catherine were about to step out of their carriage and walk through the doors that would lead them to their destiny as king and queen. The entire world held its breath as history prepared to unfold before their eyes. The carriage door opened with a soft click, and William stepped out first, his crimson coronation robe flowing behind him like liquid fire. The crowd's cheers reached a crescendo as he turned to help Catherine from the coach. Her ivory gown caught the morning light, transforming her into a vision of elegance and grace that would be remembered for generations. Together, they paused at the abbey steps, acknowledging the thunderous applause with warm smiles and gentle waves. Catherine's train, carried by 4 young page boys dressed in scarlet and gold uniforms, stretched several feet behind her as she began her ascent up the abbey steps. Each step was deliberate and measured, as she had practiced countless times in the weeks leading up to this moment. The weight of her gown and the precious jewels she wore reminded her with every movement that she was no longer simply Catherine Middleton, but the woman about to become Queen of the United Kingdom. The great west door of Westminster Abbey stood open, revealing the magnificent interior that had been transformed for this sacred ceremony. Thousands of flowers lined the nave, their sweet fragrance mixing with the ancient stone scent of the abbey. The most talented florists in Britain had worked through the night to create arrangements that honored both tradition and the couple's personal preferences. White roses, symbolizing the House of York, were paired with red roses representing the House of Lancaster, creating a visual reminder of the unity that the monarchy represented. Inside the abbey, 2,000 carefully selected guests rose to their feet as the royal couple appeared in the doorway. The congregation included heads of state from around the world, religious leaders from various faiths, military commanders, charity workers, and ordinary citizens who had been recognized for their extraordinary service to their communities. Each guest had received their invitation months in advance and had spent considerable time preparing for this moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury, resplendent in his golden vestments, stood waiting at the altar. He had spent years preparing for this ceremony, studying ancient texts and consulting with historians to ensure that every word and gesture would honor centuries of tradition while reflecting the modern monarchy that William and Catherine would lead. His face radiated calm confidence as he watched the royal couple begin their slow procession down the aisle. The abbey's world-famous choir filled the sacred space with angelic voices, singing hymns that had been carefully chosen to reflect both religious significance and the couple's personal faith journey. The music seemed to lift the spirits of everyone present, creating an atmosphere of reverence and celebration that touched the hearts of believers and non-believers alike. Each note echoed off the ancient stone walls, creating a sound that was both earthly and heavenly. William's children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, watched from their seats in the front row with barely contained excitement. George, now old enough to understand the significance of the day, sat with perfect posture, knowing that he was watching his father become king, and that someday, this ceremony would be his own. Charlotte held a small bouquet of flowers, her eyes wide with wonder at the pageantry unfolding before her. Little Louis, despite his young age, seemed to sense the importance of the moment and remained unusually still and attentive. Catherine's parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, sat nearby, their faces glowing with pride and perhaps a touch of disbelief at how far their daughter had come. Carol clutched a handkerchief, ready for the emotional moments she knew were coming. The woman who had once run a party planning business from her kitchen table was now watching her daughter become Queen of England. The fairy tale aspect of the story was not lost on anyone present. As the procession continued down the aisle, royal photographers captured every moment with precision and artistry. These images would appear in history books, royal biographies, and museum exhibitions for centuries to come. The pressure on the photographers was immense, knowing that their work would become part of the permanent record of this historic day. Every angle, every expression, every detail had to be perfect. The ancient ritual of coronation began with readings from scripture and prayers for divine guidance. The archbishop spoke about the sacred duty of monarchy, the responsibility to serve rather than be served, and the importance of leading with humility and wisdom. His words carried extra weight given the challenges facing the modern world, from climate change to social inequality to global political tensions. William knelt before the altar as the archbishop began the ceremony of anointing. This was perhaps the most sacred part of the entire coronation, a ritual that connected the new king to every monarch who had come before him. The holy oil, made from a recipe that had remained unchanged for centuries, was applied to William's hands, chest, and forehead. In this moment, he was no longer simply a man but was transformed into the Lord's anointed. Carrying the divine right to rule, the St. Edward's crown, made of solid gold and encrusted with precious gems, was lifted from its velvet cushion. This crown had been used for coronation since 1661 and was considered the most important piece in the crown jewels collection. The archbishop held it high above William's head for a moment, allowing the significance of the moment to settle over the congregation. Then, with steady hands and solemn words, he placed the crown upon the new king's head. The moment the crown touched William's head, the abbey erupted in a thunderous cry of, "God save the king." The sound was so powerful that it seemed to shake the ancient building's very foundations. Outside, church bells across London began to ring in celebration, their joyful peals carrying the news across the city and beyond. Gun salutes boomed from the Tower of London and other ceremonial sites, announcing to the world that Britain had a new king. Catherine watched her husband's transformation with tears of joy and pride streaming down her cheeks. The man she had fallen in love with at university had just become one of the most powerful figures in the world. Yet as their eyes met across the altar, she saw not a king but the same William who made her laugh, who worried about their children's homework, and who shared her dreams for making the world a better place. Now it was Catherine's turn to approach the altar. The moment that would transform her from a commoner into a queen had arrived. She rose from her seat with grace and dignity, her ivory gown rustling softly as she walked the few steps that would change her life forever. The weight of expectation from 2,000 guests and millions watching around the world could have been overwhelming. But Catherine moved with the confidence of a woman who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. The queen consort's crown, specially created for Catherine, waited on its own velvet cushion beside the altar. Unlike the heavy St. Edward's crown that now adorned William's head, Catherine's crown was more delicate, designed to complement her features while still maintaining the majesty required for such a sacred ceremony. The crown incorporated diamonds from the personal collection of Queen Elizabeth II, creating a tangible link between Catherine and the beloved monarch who had welcomed her into the royal family with such warmth. The archbishop's voice rang clear and strong as he began the ceremony. That would make Catherine queen. The ancient words, spoken in the same sacred space where Queen Elizabeth I had been crowned over 4 centuries earlier, connected Catherine to an unbroken chain of remarkable women who had worn the crown before her. Each queen had faced unique challenges during her reign, but all had shared the common burden of serving their people with dignity and grace. As Catherine knelt before the altar, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her childhood in Berkshire, where she had dreamed of many things but never of becoming queen, to her university days where she had met the love of her life, to the years of preparation and service that had shaped her into the woman she had become. Every experience, every challenge, every triumph had prepared her for this sacred responsibility. The holy oil used to anoint Catherine was the same blend that had been used for centuries, made from olive oil from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, mixed with precious spices and aromatic compounds. As the archbishop applied the oil to her forehead, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace and purpose wash over her. This was not just a ceremonial gesture, but a spiritual transformation that connected her to something far greater than herself. The moment arrived for the crowning. The archbishop lifted Catherine's crown, holding it high so that everyone present could see this symbol of royal authority and responsibility. The diamonds and precious stones caught the light streaming through the abbey's stained glass windows, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the ancient walls. Time seemed to stand still as the crown was slowly lowered onto Catherine's head. God save Queen Catherine. The cry that erupted from the congregation was even more emotional than the one that had greeted William's coronation moments earlier. There was something particularly moving about seeing a woman who had started life as a commoner achieve the highest position in the land through love, dedication, and service. The fairy tale aspect of her story resonated with people around the world who had followed her journey from university student to queen. Catherine's children beamed with pride from their front row seats. Princess Charlotte, in particular, seemed mesmerized by seeing her mother transformed into a real-life queen. The little girl had played dress-up as a princess countless times, but now she was watching her mother become something even more special. Prince George understood the significance more deeply, knowing that his parents' coronation meant that his own future as king was one step closer to reality. The ceremony continued with the presentation of the royal regalia. Each item, from the golden orb representing the Christian world to the scepter symbolizing royal authority, was placed in Catherine's hands with reverent ceremony. These were not mere decorative objects but sacred symbols that had been blessed and consecrated for the service of God and country. Catherine held each piece with appropriate solemnity, understanding their deeper meaning. The newly crowned king and queen then took their places on the coronation chairs, ancient seats that had been used for royal ceremonies for over 700 years. These chairs, made from oak and decorated with gold leaf, had supported the weight of dozens of monarchs throughout British history. Sitting in these chairs, William and Catherine became part of that illustrious lineage, inheriting both its privileges and its responsibilities. The archbishop delivered a blessing over the royal couple, asking for divine guidance and wisdom as they began their reign. His words carried particular weight given the challenges facing the modern world. The new king and queen would need to lead their nation through issues ranging from economic uncertainty to climate change, from social division to international conflicts. The blessing was both a spiritual moment and a practical prayer for the strength they would need in the years ahead. The Abbey Choir rose to their feet to perform a specially commissioned anthem written for this coronation. The music, composed by one of Britain's most celebrated contemporary composers, blended traditional religious themes with modern musical elements that reflected the couple's commitment to bridging past and future. The voices soared through the ancient space, creating a moment of pure beauty that moved many guests to tears. Representatives from each of the Commonwealth nations stepped forward to pay homage to the new king. This part of the ceremony highlighted the global nature of William's role, as he would serve not just as King of the United Kingdom, but as head of the Commonwealth, representing dozens of nations and hundreds of millions of people around the world. Each representative offered gifts from their homeland, creating a colorful display of international unity and respect. The ceremony was nearing its climax, but before the final blessing, there was one more important moment. William and Catherine joined hands as they stood before the altar, their crowns catching the light as they made their solemn vows to serve their people faithfully. These were not just ceremonial words, but heartfelt promises that would guide their actions for the rest of their lives. The sincerity in their voices moved even the most cynical observers in the congregation. As the archbishop raised his hands for the final blessing, A profound silence fell over the abbey. 2,000 people held their breath as sacred words pronounced over centuries of British monarchs were spoken once again. The blessing completed the transformation that had begun hours earlier in the palace. William and Catherine had entered the abbey as Duke and Duchess, but they would leave as King and Queen, crowned and consecrated to serve their nation and Commonwealth with dignity, wisdom, and love. The magnificent processional music began to play as King William and Queen Catherine prepared to leave Westminster Abbey as crowned monarchs. The organ's powerful notes filled every corner of the sacred space, accompanied by trumpets that announced the completion of the ancient ceremony. Every guest in the congregation stood as the royal couple began their slow walk back down the aisle, their crowns catching the colored light streaming through the abbey's stained glass windows. Catherine moved with newfound confidence, her posture reflecting the transformation that had taken place during the ceremony. The weight of the crown on her head served as a constant reminder of the responsibility she now carried, but rather than feeling burdened, she felt empowered. Each step down the aisle was a step into her destiny as queen, a role she had prepared for throughout her years as a member of the royal family. The congregation watched in respectful silence as their new king and queen passed by. Many guests dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs, moved by the emotional weight of what they had just witnessed. Foreign dignitaries, who had attended coronations in other countries, later remarked that the British ceremony possessed a unique combination of ancient tradition and genuine emotion that set it apart from other royal events they had experienced. William's face radiated a sense of calm, determination as he walked beside his wife. The young man who had once struggled with the spotlight now carried himself with the confidence of a king who understood his purpose. Years of preparation, guidance from his father and grandmother, and the steady support of Catherine had shaped him into a leader ready to face the challenges of modern monarchy. As they reached the abbey doors, the royal couple paused for a moment to look back at the congregation. This brief pause allowed them to acknowledge the support and blessing they had received from the gathered representatives of their nation and the Commonwealth. The gesture was spontaneous but deeply meaningful, showing that even in their elevated position, they remained connected to the people they would serve. The abbey doors opened to reveal a transformed London. The crowds that had been patient and excited during the ceremony had now reached a fever pitch of celebration. The roar that greeted the newly crowned king and queen was unlike anything heard in the city for generations. Thousands of British flags waved in the air while confetti and flower petals rained down from nearby buildings. The scene was a kaleidoscope of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as the eye could see. The Golden State coach waited once again, but now it would carry a king and queen rather than a prince and princess. The transformation was symbolic as well as literal. The couple who entered the coach were fundamentally different from the ones who had traveled to the abbey hours earlier. They had been touched by history, blessed by ancient ceremony, and entrusted with the future of their nation. Catherine's lady-in-waiting made final adjustments to her gown and crown before she entered the coach. Every detail was important now, as photographs taken during the return journey would become historic documents studied by future generations. The Queen's radiant smile and confident bearing would be remembered long after the celebration ended, becoming part of the visual legacy of this remarkable day. The return procession through London was even more spectacular than the journey to the Abbey. Word of the successful ceremony had spread throughout the city, bringing even more people onto the streets to catch a glimpse of their newly crowned monarchs. The crowd had become a living, breathing celebration of British identity and pride, with people from all walks of life united in their joy and excitement. Street parties had erupted spontaneously along the route, with neighbors sharing food and drink while they waited for the royal procession to pass. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders, waving miniature flags and cheering at the top of their lungs. Elderly residents watched from decorated windows, many of them remembering Queen Elizabeth's coronation 70 years earlier and marveling at how the tradition continued to evolve while maintaining its essential character. The international media coverage was unprecedented in its scope and enthusiasm. Commentators from around the world described the ceremony as a perfect blend of ancient tradition and contemporary relevance. The images of William and Catherine's coronation were already being shared millions of times on social media, reaching a global audience that exceeded even the television viewership numbers. As the coach rolled through Parliament Square, both King and Queen took special notice of the crowds of young people who had gathered there. These were their future subjects, the generation who would shape the kingdom during their reign. The enthusiasm and support shown by young Britons was particularly meaningful, as it demonstrated that the monarchy remained relevant and respected even among those who had grown up in an increasingly digital and globalized world. The processional route took them past some of London's most iconic landmarks, each one decorated specially for the coronation. The London Eye had been illuminated in royal colors, while Tower Bridge displayed massive banners congratulating the new king and queen. These modern landmarks served as a reminder that while the monarchy was ancient, it continued to adapt and remain relevant in contemporary Britain. Inside the coach, William and Catherine shared quiet moments of reflection between their waves to the crowds. They spoke in whispers about the magnitude of what had just occurred and the journey that lay ahead. These private exchanges, invisible to the cheering masses outside, showed the human side of two people who had just accepted one of the world's greatest responsibilities. The coach began its approach to Buckingham Palace, where thousands more well-wishers had gathered in front of the famous balcony. The palace itself had been decorated with flowers and banners, transforming the usually austere building into a festive celebration of the new reign. The royal standard flew proudly from the flagpole, officially announcing that the king was in residence. As they entered the palace gates for the final time as newly crowned monarchs, both William and Catherine felt the weight of history settling around them. The building that had been their London home for years would now serve as the headquarters of their reign, the place where they would make decisions that would affect millions of people around the world. The transformation was complete, but the real work of being king and queen was just beginning. The palace courtyard buzzed with activity as King William and Queen Catherine emerged from the Golden State coach for the final time that day. Palace staff lined up to greet their newly crowned sovereigns, many of them fighting back tears as they witnessed the completion of a journey they had helped support for years. These dedicated servants had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure every detail of the coronation was perfect, and their pride in the successful ceremony was evident on every face. Catherine's crown caught the afternoon sunlight as she stepped carefully from the coach, her lady-in-waiting immediately adjusting her train to ensure she looked perfect for the photographers capturing this historic moment. The queen moved with a grace that seemed effortless, though she was acutely aware that every gesture would be analyzed and remembered. The transformation from Catherine Middleton to Queen Catherine was now complete, visible in her posture, her bearing, and the confident way she acknowledged the palace staff's respectful bows. The royal family gathered in the palace's grand foyer, where emotional reunions took place away from the public eye. William's father, Charles, embraced his son with visible pride, whispering words of encouragement and blessing that only the new king could hear. The passing of the crown from father to son represented not just a transfer of power, but the continuation of a family legacy that stretched back over 1,000 years. Catherine's children rushed to her side, their earlier ceremonial composure giving way to natural excitement at seeing their mother wearing a real crown. Princess Charlotte reached up to touch the sparkling diamonds, her eyes wide with wonder at the transformation she had just witnessed. Prince George, now understanding more fully what his parents' coronation meant for his own future, stood tall with newfound maturity, while young Prince Louis simply hugged his mother's legs, happy to have her close again. The palace's staterooms had been prepared for the coronation reception, where guests from the Abbey ceremony would gather to celebrate the successful completion of the ancient ritual. International dignitaries, religious leaders, military commanders, and representatives from charities and organizations across the Commonwealth mingled in rooms that had hosted similar celebrations for centuries. The atmosphere was one of joy and relief that the ceremony had proceeded flawlessly. King William took a moment to step onto a private balcony overlooking the palace gardens, where he could process the magnitude of what had just occurred. The weight of the crown on his head was substantial, but it was nothing compared to the weight of responsibility he now carried. He thought about his grandmother's advice to always remember that the crown belonged to the people, not to the person wearing it, and he felt renewed determination to serve with the same dedication she had shown. Meanwhile, Queen Catherine retreated to her private chambers for a few minutes of solitude, before the public appearances that would mark the end of the coronation day. She looked at herself in the mirror, still adjusting to the sight of herself wearing a crown. The woman looking back at her was the same Catherine who had worried about her first royal engagement years earlier. But she was also fundamentally different, transformed by the sacred ceremony and the trust placed in her by the British people. The palace's head chef and his team worked frantically to prepare the coronation banquet, a meal that would be served to hundreds of guests and needed to represent the finest of British cuisine. Every dish had been planned months in advance, with ingredients sourced from across the United Kingdom to showcase the nation's agricultural heritage. The menu balanced traditional favorites with contemporary innovations, reflecting the same blend of old and new that characterized the modern monarchy. Outside the palace, the crowd showed no signs of dispersing. If anything, more people had gathered as the day progressed, hoping to catch a glimpse of the king and queen when they appeared on the famous balcony. The atmosphere was festive and patriotic, with spontaneous singing of the national anthem breaking out regularly. Food vendors continued to do excellent business, while souvenir sellers found eager customers for anything featuring the new royal couple's image. Television coverage of the coronation was breaking viewing records around the world. Commentators marveled at the seamless execution of the ceremony and the obvious genuine affection between William and Catherine. Royal experts analyzed every detail, from the symbolic meaning of Catherine's jewelry choices to the significance of the music selections. Social media exploded with positive reactions, creating a global conversation about the relevance and appeal of constitutional monarchy. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Palace staff opened the doors to the famous balcony, and King William and Queen Catherine stepped out to face their people for the first time as crowned monarchs. The roar from the crowd was deafening, a sound of pure joy and celebration that seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. Catherine's crown sparkled brilliantly in the afternoon sunlight as she waved to the thousands of people gathered below. Her smile was radiant and genuine, reflecting the joy she felt at sharing this moment with the British people who had supported her throughout her journey from commoner to queen. The ivory silk of her coronation gown caught the breeze, creating an image of ethereal beauty that photographers captured from every possible angle. William stood beside his wife, his own crown gleaming as he acknowledged the crowd's enthusiastic cheers. The St. Edward's crown, heavy with the weight of centuries, seemed to sit naturally on his head now, as if it had always belonged there. His face showed a mixture of humility and determination, the expression of a man who understood the magnitude of his new role and was ready to embrace it fully. The royal children joined their parents on the balcony, adding a touch of family warmth to the formal occasion. Prince George stood between his parents, his young face serious as he began to understand the historic nature of the moment. Princess Charlotte waved enthusiastically at the crowd, her natural charm winning hearts even from the palace balcony. Little Prince Louis, overwhelmed by the noise and spectacle, clung to his mother's hand while peering curiously at the sea of faces below. The crowd below stretched as far as the eye could see, a living tapestry of British society united in celebration. Union Jack flags waved in waves of red, white, and blue, while people of all ages cheered themselves hoarse. Many had tears streaming down their faces, moved by the emotional weight of witnessing history unfold before their eyes. This was their moment too, a chance to be part of something larger than themselves. Royal Air Force jets roared overhead in perfect formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky. The flyover had been timed to coincide with the balcony appearance, creating a spectacular aerial display that added military precision to the day's pageantry. The sound of the jets momentarily drowned out even the crowd's cheers. But as the aircraft disappeared into the distance, the human voices returned with renewed vigor. Catherine leaned close to William, sharing a private word that made both of them smile. These intimate moments, visible to the crowd but inaudible, reminded everyone watching that beneath the crowns and ceremonial robes, they were still the couple who had fallen in love at university and built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Their relationship had always been one of their greatest strengths, and it would serve them well in the challenges ahead. The Archbishop of Canterbury joined the royal family on the balcony, his presence adding a spiritual dimension to the public celebration. His participation in the balcony appearance emphasized the sacred nature of the coronation ceremony, and the divine blessing that the church believed had been bestowed upon the new monarchs. The sight of the royal family standing together with the senior cleric created a powerful image of unity between crown and church. As the afternoon progressed, the celebration showed no signs of waning. Street parties continued throughout London and across the United Kingdom, with communities coming together to share food, music, and joy. The coronation had become more than just a royal ceremony. It had evolved into a national celebration that brought people together across social, economic, and cultural divides. International news coverage praised the flawless execution of the ceremony and the obvious popular support for the new king and queen. Foreign correspondents noted the seamless blend of ancient tradition with contemporary relevance, describing the coronation as a masterclass in how constitutional monarchy could remain meaningful in the modern world. The positive global reaction reinforced Britain's soft power and cultural influence on the world stage. As evening approached, King William and Queen Catherine made their final appearance of the day on the palace balcony. The crowd, though smaller than earlier, was no less enthusiastic. Many people had waited all day for this moment, determined to be part of the historic celebration. The sight of their newly crowned sovereigns still wearing their coronation regalia created memories that would last a lifetime. The day that had begun with nervous anticipation in palace chambers ended with confident satisfaction on the famous balcony. William and Catherine had successfully navigated one of the most important days in British royal history, transforming themselves from prince and princess into king and queen with grace, dignity, and obvious love for their people. The coronation was over, but their reign as constitutional monarchs had just begun, promising a new chapter in the long and storied history of the British crown.